Okay, hey everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion on how to make hardware bug bounties better. So I can be a fairly fast talker, or something I've been struggling with my entire life. So if I go too fast, raise a hand, ask me to repeat. Happens. I've been working on it. Don't really get better. We have a small panel today. It's only 2 people, so we'll probably try to keep it a bit interactive at the end. Basically, try to involve the audience a little bit, ask some questions to you guys. Around hardware bug bounties, especially if you participate in them, and how you can help us, or the people around them, actually make them better. So let's start with some introductions. Eduardo, do you want to start? And tell us who you are and what you do and where you're from and what you do for Google. And
Sure. My name is Eduardo. I'm from Mexico. I'm based in the Zurich office for Google, and I've been working at Google since 2010-ish. Which means I'm very old. I work on the security response team who does, like, when someone reports a vulnerability to Google, we try to make sure it's dealt with properly. And when some Googler finds an issue in third-party companies, we also help them, like, tell the company and then publicly disclose it later and things like that. One of the things that Google changed in the last, 5 years or so is that we have more hardware devices, so we've been trying to do things more hardware-y. But otherwise, Google, most services for the last 12 years or so I've been there were more like cloudy related. And yeah.
Victor, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. So, hello everybody. I'm Victor Vuillard, CTO Cybersecurity at Parrot. So, as you may know, Parrot is the first European drone manufacturer and second manufacturer worldwide. So, Parrot kind of invented drones for the consumer something like 12 years ago. And nowadays, we design drones for professional, be it for defense and security, or for companies that want to do mapping or inspection or whatsoever with drones. And as far as our market is going to more sensitive activity, we just don't design toys anymore. It's quite important for us to have the best cybersecurity. So of course we first did internal audits or audits done by third parties, but we found it interesting to launch bug bounties to have different point of views and ways of looking for vulnerabilities into systems.
Awesome, thank you. So we're going to start this with, I work for a company that's been doing software bug bounties for a fairly long time, and funny enough, we also start doing devices, right? So we are in a kind of a nascent state of doing hardware bug bounties, but we are struggling a little bit with it. So From your point of view, what's the difference between being successful running a software bug bounty to being successful running a hardware bug bounty? Because they are fairly different. Eduardo, who wants to start?
Actually, yes, it's quite different. And when we have our bug bounty program, we include into the bug bounty both the embedded device, be it the drone itself and the remote controller, as well as the mobile app used to control the drone or web services that may be used to share flight data and such things. And what I see is that there's very less people looking at the embedded parts. So it's quite easy to find 100 or 200 people looking at the web services or mobile app, but just a few experts looking at the embedded device. So what's quite important first is to have skilled people looking at the embedded device, and that's the main difference, finding skilled people.
So any advice of actually finding skilled researchers?
Actually, that's why we are here, because when skilled people don't come to you, you have to find places where those skilled people go, and hardwear.io seems to me like the right place. So it's the second time we participate with the hardware hacking contest, and we are really pleased to see many people looking at the security of our devices, and I think it's quite interesting to be there.
Okay, thank you. How about you, Eduardo? What's your thoughts on that question?
So we one thing that I guess is slightly different with cloud services is the availability of hardware is a bit more complicated. You need to have the device most of the time to be able to either play with the radios or with the hardware or whatever it is that you want to do with it. And you might break it in the process, and if you break it, you have to buy a new one. And sometimes the hardware is fairly expensive, so then you have to have more money, which is a lot more complicated. You also need equipment that you are less likely to have. Like if it's software, it's more likely to have like open source software or something to do software hacking. If you're doing GDB or Jydra or whatever. But for hardware, you need like proper like hardware tools, like real life tools, which have to cost money because they are not like bits; they're atoms. So the problem we have, or that we need to solve somehow, is also being able to provide either the devices for bug hunters to play with, or a way for them to acquire them and then play with them offline. In cases that is not possible because of shipping, because it's complicated, or like whatever reason, then you also need to find ways that they can collaborate, even if it's not through the hardware hacking. Like maybe they can have things that they can do for hardware hacking that is online. So if there is some, like for example, a device that everyone has in their pocket is a phone, and a phone is some sort of hardware hacking in some cases, and you might be able to hack some of the device by looking at the code that is open source or the binary releases that you have. So that there is like some compromise that you can find in the middle, but generally it's definitely not the same. It's easier to do cloud services and so on. Even though you don't have code or anything, you at least the barrier of entry is a lot lower. But yeah, we still have to find the balance. It's taken some time, but of course, it just requires talking to people, experimenting it, seeing what they struggle with, what they succeed at, and iterate. It's trial and error, I guess.
Completely agree that it's important that the security researchers gets access to the devices, and that's why we organized ourselves with the Bug Bounty platform, Yes React, that proposed a few persons who were eager to look at those devices. Then we could send a few of those. But it's also really important if you want to have this bug bounty before the launch of a product, which might be even more interesting than after, because it's always preferable to find issues before launch of the products. So it's quite of an issue to find the right people and the people you trust, so that you can share with them a device that is not yet on the market.
So you're both pointing out something that is very interesting, which is the scaling issue, but also the cost of entry, right, to actually get into hardware testing. So, as I said, as a nascent program for us, do you have any advice on what we can do to kind of both lower the bar of entry for people to actually make it more accessible, and also make it scale better? Should we look at emulators? Are there other things that we could do to make that happen?
Yeah, completely. And you mentioned that, emulators. So what we have at Parrot is that for our own developers, we have a simulator that emulates the whole firmware, and the firmware for the simulator on the computer is built almost the same way as the one running on the drone. So there's very little difference. So for a security researcher, you can access 95% of what's happening on the drone, but having that just emulated on the computer, it really eases everything. And even for those people that don't have access to the device itself, it's useful. So first, that tool was not meant for security. It was meant for internal development as well as developers, because we offer the possibility to third party to create applications that run into the drone, just like you have mobile app running on a smartphone. So we enable the same model. But then this tool was quite useful for security.
Okay, thank you. Eduardo, any thoughts?
Similar to what was mentioned before, if there is any sort of information that can be shared to the researchers, that is useful. Like, of course you cannot share everything, but as much as you can get away with, I think that helps. if you have an emulator that you can share, that's awesome. If you don't have an emulator, then whatever it is that you might have, that might be able to be helpful. Like if you have a setup that allows you to run, I don't know, something in QEMU or something like that, then even like providing the command line flags or the write build settings or whatever, that might be good enough. But it depends on it definitely depends on the device that you have, and like it might not make sense to emulate like a wristband, but it might make sense to emulate parts of it or components of or something, depending on how it's built, what is the purpose, the threat model that you might be interested to test, things like that.
Okay, that makes sense. So I'm starting to spin this program up, and I'm starting to think about, for example, things like intake. So basically, bugs coming in, I need to be able to repro them. I need analysts to basically be able to, for them to repro, make sure it's actual bugs and understand what impact we have and all that. So any thoughts around that? So do I need to do something different with intake processes since it's hardware bugs? I probably need some kind of lab setup to be able to actually be able to repro the bugs. I need probably the bug builds and all that to be able to do everything. I need an analyst team to do this for me. So where should I start with all this? It's a fairly big undertaking. So where do I start? What skills do I prioritize? What equipment do I start out buying? And so on and so forth. Very big question, I know.
Well, actually, Parrot is not such a big company, not like Google. I wish we were going to that level, but not yet. And the cyber team is quite close to research and developments, be it electronics or embedded software or whatsoever. So if someone reports a potential issue, it's quite easy to pair someone cyber with someone doing developments and to test different scenarios and to see what's relevant and what's not.
So we also were worried about this when we did it first time. The devices VRP now is paying a lot of money for certain devices, but it's been in scope for a while. And when we first added it in scope, I remember we asked the Nest team to send us like to all of our offices these little like lab setups for the thermostats, because that's what Nest was at the time, like this little thermostat. And it was fun. We set it up. It was like a lot of I mean, it was a fun building exercise, but we never really got bugs in the thermostat. So I guess the barrier of entry was so high that and at the time we didn't solve it, that it wasn't that big of a deal. I think if you are likely to get a lot of reports, then you definitely need to fix all of the potential problems with intake and the subject matter expertise, because the barrier of entry is also higher for your internal triage team. But unless you get a lot of reports, this is unlikely to be a concern. So I guess it depends on like how many reports you end up getting, and then maybe you can start with what you can prepare a little bit, and then if you get more than you expected, then you scale it up from there. But based on fortunately, it hasn't done. It's not as big of a problem for hardware than it is for software, because for software there is so many people that can start testing that the signal-to-noise ratio is a lot worse than it is for hardware, because the folks that can get half of the way to hardware are already like so smaller that are significantly more likely to know what they are doing. So, I don't know, it's complicated. It's not answering your question, but it's mostly saying that it's maybe less of a problem for hardware because it's so hard. It's in the name.
So that's actually an interesting point, though, because that actually proves that the bar of entry is actually very high, the fact that you're getting a low amount of bug reports, right? So let's say that we manage to lower that bar of entry and actually get more people to participate and actually get more reports, which probably means the quality will go down. What do you recommend, or what should I keep in mind to deal with that inflood of low-quality reports that hopefully happens since we managed to then lower the bar of entry?
That's right. Let's let's lower the barrier of entry and then we'll find out. But no, I don't think it has been. We haven't had that problem, at least. So the general sense so far has been that either the reports are reproducible by humans, so you don't need to be very technical. You just play a little bit and then you reproduce it, in which case that is maybe the more complicated part. Or they are like completely technical and complicated, and then the volume is very low, so you can manage them. You can like wild glow the reports, or at least we've been able to. Even though we have a lot of problems, it hasn't been as big of a problem.
Okay. How about you, Victor, working for a slightly smaller company than Google? What would you do if you're starting to see an inflood of reports, which, as I said, is good in a way, but at the same time, it's also hard to kind of keep that quality and not be overwhelmed, or have your analysts being overwhelmed?
Actually, I've seen a lot of reports be accurate or not accurate, because there's a lot of false positive or bad reports that assume something which is not real. But that's really an issue on the software side, and especially for web services and things that people can test very easily. And something which is a bit disappointing that not most, but a lot of bug bounty researchers just use their tools on the services and say, hey, my tool reports this. They didn't dig into the problem, but they say, hey, I want a bounty, a reward for that. And so because of this, we got a lot of reports in the web service part. But concerning the embedded software parts, of course, researchers have to understand how it works and to be more accurate. I think that's thanks to that, the noise ratio is really lower, and it's easier for us to deal with reports easily. That's not much of a problem.
Okay. So switching gears a little bit, let's talk about bounty and bounty amounts. They've been fairly well set for the software industry for quite a while. Do you see the hardware bounties being different? And again, we kind of think about that bar rent, right? You have to spend more money to get maybe to participate in the program. Should bounty amounts be the same as software? Should it be higher? Should it be lower?
I think exploits are more expensive than vulnerabilities, and it's harder to find vulnerabilities in hardware than it is for software, because it's just not as trivial to identify. But if there was something that was very easy to find, as easy to find as web services, for example, then probably you can get away paying a lower amount. But if they have to do like this jailbreak, and then once they have the jailbreak, then they start the firmware, and then they do this and that, and all of that takes like months and months of work and dedication, then you in order for that to be like properly like rewarded, you probably want to pay a lot more. And by a lot more, I mean like not 4 or 5 digits, but like a little bit above. And that is like a lot more expensive, and it also kind of is because the barrier of entry is higher. So then if we were to lower the barrier of entry and it was easier to find like buffer overflows in like the firmware, then maybe you don't have to pay that much money. So it's all about like whether you're paying for someone to identify a mistake that you make, or you're paying for someone to conduct months and months of research to find the mistake that you made. And that difference is mostly what drives these reward amounts and so on. Because it kind of feels weird that you spend all of this time, and then you get like, I don't know, a couple, like you spend like half a year of your life, like doing all this work. And then at the end, like you still feel good about the acknowledgements and about the success and everything. But then you get a reward that you feel like, oh, I probably should have like done something else. And then I should probably have, I don't know, done anything else. And then that would have made it like more, I don't know, economically feasible. But most people do it not for the money anyway. So there is like an extra incentive that, like, if you want to work on this, you can just work on it. The fact that you can just hack other things and then break it apart and then have fun with it, I think that's also part of the incentive. But it's more respectful to match the rewards with the effort involved. That which is the problem. So yeah, I guess if we can lower the bar, we can get away with paying less. But because the bar is so high right now, we probably have to match the reward with the effort involved. It's all about the bar.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Victor, any thoughts on that?
Not so many thoughts. As a smaller company, it's always hard to propose bounties at the same level as Google or Tesla or whoever. But we try to do our best to give enough incentive. So some people will look at our products, but as you mentioned, most of the security researchers are already paid by their own company to look for vulnerabilities, and it's just something that comes after their pay from the company.
So do you see less researchers spending time on your products because you are a smaller company with less resources compared to people spending, for example, time on Google devices?
Well, when I see few companies that propose to $200,000 for reward, I guess it's much more an incentive compared to what we propose. So, of course, some people may want to look at the Tesla rather than the one.
Okay, that makes sense. So I want to go back to something we talked about a while back, 10 minutes ago, which was, again, bar of entry, because it's an interesting point to all this, and the fact that we have quite a few people doing software or application-based bug bounties. How can we get some of those people that are actually good at dealing with reverse engineering and more application-based bug bounties that participate in more hardware-style bug bounties? Are there anything I can do that to basically enable those people to participate in more hardware-style bug bounties? For example, hand out firmware or anything else?
I think those folks are focused on the part that they have right now, and if they want to get into hardware, they have to invest a lot of time and effort into it. And if what they have right now is good, unless they are like super curious into something new, it might not be as effective. We've tried to give trainings to bug hunters on our bug hunters, on our normal bug hunters, on hardware hacking and things like that. Partial success. I think if we wanted to be huge success, we probably want to find folks that are already deep into hardware security, and then, or at least deep into hardware, and then try to get them into hardware security to some degree, because then they are more likely to already have the tools, to have paid the barrier of entry, to have done more of that work that for someone that is on the other area of security to enter. Like it's easier to enter into security than to enter into hardware, and there's a lot more folks that are more likely to move from hardware to hardware security than from web security, let's say, to hardware security. Even though like it's still fun, it's just like it feels like such a big amount of work that I will be more optimistic about hardware security folks, especially based on like what we've had so far. But then again, maybe there's like another way to do it, or another way to incentivize it that makes it more successful. But for now, we haven't found it yet.
So you said that you were training researchers in basically finding bugs on hardware. So can you tell me a bit more about that? What you did and why it sounds like it partly failed, why it failed?
No, I mean, we found lots of bugs. It was cool and everything. We invited them to our offices in California. A bunch of Googlers were in the training as well, so it was a mix between bug hunters and Googlers. We had external trainers and some Googlers training. We had devices handed out, software-defined radios. We had like lots of info about how certain things work for the device we were targeting. We gave them an explanation about how certain things worked. It was fun. And then we did an on-site hacking event, and then we found issues and everything. But the bug hunters didn't continue sending hardware reports later. They just continued sending the same ones they were sending us before. So it was fun for like that, like as a one-time event, but it wasn't like something that really convinced them to move into that field going forward. And they haven't sent us anything since then. But during the event, it was awesome. So it was fun. It was a lot of fun. So at the very least, we successfully had a lot of fun, and we found issues. But the long-term effects didn't happen.
Okay, that sounds like something definitely worth trying for us. Victor, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, I think there's no magic solution. We try to provide as many devices as needed, and especially take time to explain to the security researchers what we did, how we did that, and up to which point we made efforts and everything, so that they know where to search and where might be the limitation. So the mindset is to be as transparent as possible, and share everything we can, and share firmwares and much more, so that the security researcher is more efficient this way, because it's to our benefits. Security researcher are that efficient, but there's not much more we can do, I think.
Okay, so you saw better success basically by not oversharing, but sharing as much as we could. Okay. So let's say that I'm up and running. I have my program. I'm getting bugs, which is awesome. People are actually looking at my stuff, and I'm getting past that bar of entry. And one of the side effects with hardware is the fact it's harder generally to patch that software. Like if I'm pushing out a new code to prod like once a day or twice a day, that makes things very easy to patch. Whereas with a firmware device, it can take months to actually push something out to the device. If it's mask ROM, I might not even be able to patch it in the field. So let's say I get a report and it's going to take me a long time to patch this. How do I handle this in a good way to both keep the researcher happy so they don't run off and get angry because it's taking so long, while at the same time actually getting myself enough time to patch it and actually roll out in a sensible manner where I have enough time to do QA and all that?
So first you can give a reward to the researcher before you issue a patch, which is a good practice. And at Parrot we never had to do any modification on the electronic part or something that would be too difficult to do at this point. And fortunately we have ways to push firmware updates that the user can apply on the device thanks to the mobile app you use to control the drone. So thanks to this, it was quite easy to handle. But once we had a problem which was not related to the bug bounty, but we had an issue with our secure element that had a bug. And as a matter of fact, when you have a secure element, once it's there, you can modify its firmware or how you personalize the data pushed into the security component. So fortunately, that was before launch of the product. But for those cases, you just have to trash all the one you order and get other components.
Okay, great. Eduardo?
So, several years ago, many years ago now, we sent, 8 years ago, because it was the first time I was in Zurich, we sent as a gift to security researchers, as a Christmas gift, a little USB computer device. Like it had a little CPU and it was like I don't remember what it was called, but yeah, some people here might actually remember when I described the story. And it was supposed to have some sort of secure element where you load like whatever software you want, and then you can lock it so that you cannot extract secrets and things from it after the fact. And then the folks, it was not a Google product, it was a off-the-shelf component, but we thought it was a cool gift. We sent it to everyone, and then we found out, or the vendor found out that there was a bug on it that allowed you to like essentially take over the device. So it was like it didn't provide the security features that it was promising to provide anymore. What this company did is it documented on their website exactly how to break it. It provided an exploit, and it just became like, this is a device that we have. Like, sorry about that, but such is life. Disclosure doesn't have to be a bad thing. If the company is in control of disclosure, it even provides the company a way, like in this case, to present themselves as the deliverer of bad news, provide transparency, and gain trust with their customers. And that's what, I mean, it would have been better, of course, if the bug wasn't there, but that's the right way to handle it. Not try to hide it. If you cannot fix it, then you just like tell them that you cannot fix it. And the public probably wants to know that the device that they are putting their trust on has some issues, and if you cannot fix it, like in the case of CPUs or things like that, then like it's better that they know that their shit is broken. So yeah, I guess I'm not sure if that answered your question, but
yeah. It's not a bug; it's a feature.
It's a vulnerable feature, yes.
So actually, we had a little conversation during lunch as well. I kind of want to go into that one a little bit because I have to do some of the answers or some of the things we're talking about. We were talking about bug reports when I get a bug report, but it's actually since other devices have components from various different manufacturers, and I get a report, but it's actually for a one of the subcomponents I'm using. How should I handle that? Like, how do I interact with vendors that supply things to me and they have low quality, and that ends up making my products vulnerable?
Well, that is a problem that we all have. Even in the cloud, this is supply chain as well, right? There is no difference between hardware and software in this case. We all use third-party components. When you find an issue in OpenSSL, like the one that is going to drop in a couple days, we all are going to have to probably struggle a little bit to find out whether it's actually remote code execution or not. And Log4j was a good example of that as well, where like a bunch of people actually were like panicking and throwing their systems over. So it's the same. This part is the same as with software, in the sense that we all have vulnerable components, and if they are hardware that you cannot fix, then you're doomed. If they are hardware that you can fix, then you try to fix it if you can. But we are all in an interconnected world. It's very rare that, unless you build everything yourself, it's very rare that you're not going to have some third-party dependencies. Like whether it is the Linux kernel or it is the or underlying like third-party hardware, or it is like your own the hardware that you're shipping, or like in the case of like a modem or whatnot. You always will have to have like a solution and a strategy to dealing with those problems. And if you don't have the strategy to deal with those problems, that's a problem of your product, not a problem of this third-party component. And if you're dealing with open source things, or if you're dealing with partners that you have a good relationship with, then you can work together to make their devices or their software or their hardware better. If you can't, because that's the only thing you have, which happens sometimes, then you can try to isolate them so that when they have problems, they have less of a chance of affecting your product or your threat model, or your users at least. But then at the end, like, if you cannot do anything, then it's as if it was a bug with your product, and you just have to like acknowledge that that's life, and then try to either do something else with tell the users again, like if it was in your product, or try to mitigate it outside if there's some way. But sometimes it's very hard, so it's a problem for sure.
Yeah, I don't see much difference concerning dependencies between software and more hardware. Looking at how we build our own firmware, we depend on thousands of open source components as well as other third parties, and we monitor every CVE for every component each time we build our own firmware, so that we can fix that before it goes public. And for me, it's the same if you have a vulnerability in a Wi-Fi chip or basement or whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. So, as I said, we have a fairly small panel today, so we're going to do something slightly different that we normally don't do in panels, which is we're actually going to invite the audience to ask questions. So, we have two very experienced people here. We've been running hardware bug bounties of various sort for quite a while, so if anyone in the audience have a question at this point, I think we would welcome that. Do we have a microphone? Thank you, Andreas.
Hi guys, thanks for your time. So apologies, this is not really a question, but listening to you talk is kind of got me thinking. So as you can probably tell by my accent, I've travelled quite a long way to be here, so I'm from New Zealand. So I work at a security company called CyberCX. You probably haven't heard of it because it's Australia/New Zealand based, but it's actually quite a large organisation, about 1,000 people, and we have about 200 pen testers. So the reason I kind of wanted to raise this was my job at CyberCX is to oversee the hardware, embedded systems, IoT, pen testing side of the business. And one thing I'm struggling with is an issue of business model. So bug bounties are a business model which is results based, right? You spend lots and lots of time potentially. You find a bug, you get paid for the bug. The business model of CyberCX and other consultancies that do pen testing is a time-based business model. You sort of have a customer, you get engaged, you get paid X number of days, and you move on. So that business model works fine for, say, pen testing a web application. You can kind of relatively get a feel for how long it's going to take you to review that thing. Hardware, as you have kind of just talked about, there's aspects to hardware. So there's the entry, there's the tooling, there's the skill set, there's the time is the critical one. So what I'm really hoping to achieve is to have the time to find the vulnerabilities, but have it work within a business model of a functioning business, as opposed to an independent researcher that fires up their laptop on the weekend, does some bug bounties for some web applications, maybe makes a few $1,000, submits some bugs. To me, I guess here's me forming a question because it's a bit more of a rant, so apologies for that. My question to you is, given some of these challenges you just mentioned about barrier entry, how long it takes to find the bugs, just finding skilled people to do the bug finding, do you see a middle ground where companies are participating in bug bounties, and there's a sort of level of vetted, in terms of where the equipment needs to go, as opposed to just hoping independent researchers sign up. That's still obviously really a fantastic thing if that happens. But you're business people. Do you think there's a model that might work? Can you see bug bounties working in the context of a functioning consulting business?
Actually, I have one example where I gave a couple of drones to a private company, Tenable, which analyzed that within their zero-day initiative program or research division. And at that time, I did not have bug bounty, but I think that they found two medium issues and reports that to us. And at that time, if I had a bug bounty, I would just handle the issue within the bug bounty so that the person gets reward. So there might be a business model, as you mentioned, but I'm not sure that every company would fit with this model. It would fit with Tenable because it's such a big company that can spend days and days for looking for zero-day vulnerabilities in software or even hardware companies. Actually, they did that at the time because they wanted to show to their clients that they knew the IoT sector and such. So they have to find some reason to do so.
Some of our bug hunters are actually companies. So that actually exists. They do it mostly for the reputation more than for they want to say that they hack Google more than actually caring about the money, and that actually gives them value for themselves. Also, like there are some companies who, there are some companies that are full-time bug bounty companies, where the security researchers get half of the reward and the other half goes to the company. But in addition, they also have salaries. So you can also imagine that this model already exists and it definitely is active, and we pay them a lot of money, so it must be very successful. There's other situations in which we proactively have worked with pen testing companies where we give them a grant, we give them money ahead of time that they can keep regardless of whether they find anything or not, like $10,000, $20,000, and then we pay them also for the findings that they find. So hopefully, as a whole, it's not just worth their time, but also like a little bit more. So yeah, I think the pen testing companies are definitely in the ecosystem. They are not the biggest players for everything, but for some areas at least, that definitely exists. Maybe for hardware, that is a good way that this could work out, but it hasn't been that at least I haven't seen as many from hardware folks, but it could work. It's not a bad idea.
Well, I don't have a question as such, but I have a suggestion to most of the hardware bug bounty manufacturers, because we've been organizing conferences and we have some feedback from the community. Many times I have seen that the community researchers build a relationship with the program manager that runs the Bounty program, and whenever there's a reorg happening, the program managers change, and then when the new one comes, they don't appreciate the researchers that they have worked with, or they have done work for, let's say, an XYZ researcher has been doing consistently and reporting bugs or finding new bugs or trying to evaluate a product for a long period of time, and then there's a reorg happening, and the reorg does not appreciate the researcher because of XYZ reason, the program is dead or something. So this is a kind of a bit of feedback that we get from the community that reorgs happen, program managers are changed, and then the community is not very happy. So do you guys think that something can be done to fix that?
What you say here is that human relationships is important, and as well as in cybersecurity and hardware security. That's true. And just like in every field, we have to deal with humans.
I will imagine it will be ideal to diversify. So if there is like a single program manager that is the only person that bug hunters interact with, I know which company you're talking about. So I think that definitely doesn't work out well. I think it's better when you get to see many people that interact with your bugs and that you get to talk to and so on. So that when one of them has a kid and wants to go for another job or whatever, or wants to move countries or whatever it is the reason that they want to leave, then they don't feel that way, I guess. But I don't know. We haven't had that problem, so it's hard to know exactly what drives the reorgs. But yeah, it definitely is a challenge that your connections on the company disappear every couple of years. That's kind of weird.
Hello, I have a question. When you run hardware bug bounty programs, for example, VIP or hardcore, do you ask or get permission from the chip vendors? Sometimes I found from experience it is difficult for a security researcher not to get sued by some of the chip vendors. How do you tackle this?
We had an interesting case with one. He wants your microphone. Oh, okay. I was thinking like, is he the one that sued you? No. It's similar to the question that was asked earlier about third-party components and dependencies, and the fact that maybe hardware manufacturers are a little bit more in like the 90s when these issues where security, like hacking, was a crime or whatever. So I can see how we've had that situation where we had like intervene or get in the middle and try to defend security researchers and so on. I think dealing through these companies, through the folks in the middle that actually get it, it's more like the right way to make this happen, because then you are a little bit isolated from the hit. If you go directly to the upstream components, or down, it's a little bit more complicated. And it's very hard for the company to intervene in that case, especially if they are new to this space and they don't know how to handle these situations. But it's a problem, yeah. Oh, I don't think so, no. No, I think it's our products. And, of course, there are situations in which it's actually important. But because like for the MCA, there is like some regulations about reverse engineering hardware that protects copyright or something like that, and those situations are more critical. But for the situations in which we can, not have to deal with this, then then no.
Okay, I think we're almost at time. We're at time. So unless anyone actually has some questions, I think. We have a couple more questions. Let's go.
Hi, thank you so much for the panel. It's interesting. I'm interested about, do you have some kind of partnerships or programs related to academia, the research centers? They have the equipment, they have people skilled that are able to to try to find vulnerabilities there, but they also find vulnerabilities in some devices. But maybe there's some kind of programs that let them to start with the companies, start with the devices. They will focus on that ones instead of other ones. And there is resources. There is the really interesting equipment with people. Sometimes we're not able to find that companies to try to search vulnerabilities in that devices. When you have that kind of programs or partnerships, things like that.
The thing that comes to mind is that we were in Nolcom Berlin, the other conference that he organizes. Come, it's in March next year. And there we gave a bunch of devices, like a ton of devices, and some of them were to academics precisely for this reason, because they said like, oh yeah, if you give us some, exactly what you said. So I think that works. I'm not sure, there is no like formal like academic outreach thing, but we will treat them as any other security researcher, and I think that's fine. There's also like pen testing companies, as the other question was implying, that might actually do the same as well, like what you did with Tenable, and there's also like skilled security researchers that might actually also do it also just for fun. So yeah, I think maybe you're right also that academics sometimes have a lot of time and nothing to do. So I think that's a good idea.
Concerning Parrot, anyone can apply to the bug bounty forum, so it can be an individual or a company or a university or research institute or whatsoever. You can just have a try.
Thanks for your talk. I'm coming from the security evaluation lab for SGS Pricing, and we are doing the hardware evaluation, software evaluation, stuff like that. So when we are doing these evaluations, it's always whiteboard. So we have a lot of interactions with developers, architects, stuff like that, and it's very easy for us to find the vulnerabilities. So I got the question, like, do you think that it will be a trend to open source the hardware? Did on the older Titans, and do you think it will encourage all other researchers to come to bugs or something like that?
That would be cool. A trend, I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, we will see in a couple of years, but that's cool. Yeah, I wish a lot more things were open source. Yeah.
I was going to say, Victor, you kind of alluded to that earlier when you were talking about actually releasing firmware and trying to basically release as much as you can to actually make research easier.
Actually, at Parrot, we have a broad history of open sourcing a lot of software we do and contributing to open source projects. I already shared electronic designs and such things to few researchers. Most of the time, I got legal department looking for NDAs and many things before, but we can. Maybe we could just have some smoother process to that, but it's still possible. But we also try to work with vendors that are in the same mindset. I mean, using components that were evaluated and such. So, for example, speak about the lab that doing certification and testing components. So, for example, we chose a secure element that was already common criteria certified, and we know that it's at a certain level of verification. But for our own designs, of course, we might in some cases share more information.
Okay, do we have any more questions? Okay, one more.
It's a question probably may have already discussed it, but it's about scoping. It's also in the software bug bounty as well. What I have noticed when I was doing hardware bounty was like always a conflict of scope. For example, let's say I found some issues in fault injection. That's ideally considered like overly sophisticated. But vendors don't really agree with that. They say it's like still a hardware attack. So still they need access to highly sophisticated devices, or they need to be invasive to the chip. But from let's say a researcher's perspective, if I attack one chip, then probably from there I can traverse to different one. So with my experience, I've seen like always is a conflict between the bug bounty runners and also the researchers. So where like okay, when I say it's a vulnerability, and then the vendor says like it's not, it's a hardware attack, so it's not right. How would you
this is also a problem for normal software. It's not unique to hardware. Like sometimes what is a vulnerability is a very philosophical question. Usually what matters is that there is something of value that someone can get from someone else. So if with a fault injection attack, there is an attack scenario that actually matters where this could actually put someone at risk or steal or cause damage or anything, then I think you could consider it a vulnerability. If you can break your own device, or you can do something to your own device that maybe has no significant security consequence, then maybe less so. Sometimes companies protect their firmware for no good reason. So the fact that you can extract the firmware maybe is not that big of a deal. So I guess it will always depend on what it is, the attack that they're trying to, like if you're trying to jailbreak your like to be able to play arbitrary games, like homebrew your what is it called, like gaming device, so that you can like play games and so on. Like then, I mean, I'm not sure. Like I guess the vendor will actually consider it a vulnerability if they want to protect against you playing things on your own device, but they probably wouldn't consider it if they don't actually see that as a threat in their threat model, because they don't have like partners that do revenue share and things like that. So then I imagine that then in those cases then it matters a little bit less. So it will always depend on what is the attack scenario and what is the threat model that you're presenting. And I imagine that when you're talking to the company about this, you want to talk about it in those terms. Not about whether it's a vulnerability or not, but about what is the attack scenario, like what will the attacker gain, who is the victim, who is the attacker, and so on. And this is true not just for hardware. This is also true for all types of security research, which is like the fact that there is like a specific vulnerability or attack class or something like that a specific software or hardware is affected by doesn't always mean that the issue has security consequences. And vice versa, the fact that something that is completely working as intended has security consequences can be a vulnerability, even though it doesn't look like one. So it's always about the attack scenario and less about like the vulnerability class or the attack that is being made. And if I'm talking about it at those higher level terms, is usually what is going to make it easier for the triagers or for the researcher to agree on something. Even if that agreement is like, I consider that a big deal because I use my device this way, and the vendor doesn't expect you to use it that way. But at least then you are in agreement that is a disagreement. The disagreement is like you're using it in a weird way. But, well, it's complicated at that point.
Yeah, I think it's quite important for the bounty reports to be first accurate and then based on real attack scenarios and not assumptions or raise hypothetical problems. So just like when you hire pen testers, you want them to find real vulnerabilities, exploit them, and at the point where they exploit it, see where they can just go further. So for bug bounties, it's the same. You're looking for real problems, and as far as you find real problems, then you know how to reproduce this problem. It's quite easy, I find, to explain to the security researchers, okay, I validated your problem and the impact of this problem is that high. When it's accurate, most of the time, there's no disagreement.
Okay, and with that, we're out of time. So, Eduardo, Victor, thank you so much for doing this and answering my questions. Fun. So, thank you.
Thank you.